Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing a close reading of a really architecturally striking chapter of the Quran. Chapter 26, Ash-Shu'ara, which translates to the poets.
It's a long one, 227 verses, and that title, The Poets, it's almost a puzzle, isn't it? Because the chapter actually ends by defining itself against certain kinds of poets.
Exactly. So how does that work? What's the overall structure we're looking at here?
Well, you can think of it like bookends. There's an opening section and a closing section, both focused on the Quranic revelation itself, its nature, its source, the opposition it faces.
And sandwiched between those.
7 detailed stories of past prophets. Their main focus is really the consequences faced by those who rejected the divine message.
Okay, let's unpack that opening frame then. Verses 1 through 9, it kicks off with those mysterious letters.
Straight away, it sets a unique tone. Commentaries speculate, of course, maybe abbreviations for divine names or structural markers, but the main effect, it signals this isn't ordinary human speech.
It immediately establishes its difference. And then verse 2 calls it the signs of the clear book, Al-Kitab al-Mubin.
Right. Self-referential from the start. It asserts its own clarity and authority.
And then, almost immediately, it addresses the prophet's own struggle. Verse 3, telling him not to torment himself, Saka, over the rejection he's facing.
Yes, it acknowledges the human cost of the mission. It says that the disbelievers, well, they turn away from every new reminder where that comes. That's verse 5.
But there's a warning, too. Verse 6 suggests they will eventually face the reality of what they mocked.
Precisely. And before launching into the big stories, verses 7 to 9 ground the message. Look at creation, it says. Look at the earth. The noble kinds of growth. That's the first sign offered.
And this brings us to that crucial mechanism you mentioned, the refrain in verses 8 and 9.
Yes. Truly in that is a sign, but most of them are not believers. And truly thy Lord is the mighty, the merciful. This exact pair of verses appears 8 times in the chapter.
8 times. What's the effect of that repetition? It feels very deliberate.
It absolutely is. It creates this powerful rhythm, a sense of historical certainty. Each narrative concludes, the consequences unfold, and snap this refrain locks the theological point in place. God's mercy and might, the presence of signs, the reality of disbelief, it's constant.
It's like a drumbeat marking the pattern of revelation and response throughout history.
Exactly. It emphasizes consistency. The warning Muhammad is delivering now follows the same divine pattern seen before.
A perfect lead-in, then, to the first major narrative block, Moses, or Musa, verses 10 through 68. It starts with his initial call, but highlights his anxieties.
Very much so. Verses 10 to 15 show his vulnerability. He's worried they'll deny him. That's verse 11. He speaks of his straightened breast and his tongue not being unfettered. Verse 13. He worries about his speech.
And there's that past incident, too, isn't there? The killing of the Egyptian. He fears being killed in return. Verse 14 mentions his crime.
Right. It's a very human portrait. But God reassures him in verse 15, promising our signs. The message is that divine support overcomes these personal fears and limitations.
Then comes the confrontation with Pharaoh. Verses 16 to 31. This feels like a template for how power reacts to truth.
It really does. Pharaoh's first move, verse 19, is to reframe it personally. He accuses Moses of ingratitude, calling him kafir, and brings up Moses' past, saying he did that deed when he was astray, verse 20, trying to discredit the messenger.
Undermine him personally, rather than engage with the message.
Exactly. But Moses pushes back, verse 22, reminding Pharaoh about the enslavement of the Israelites, turning Pharaoh's claim of benefaction on its head.
And then the dialogue pivots to the core issue. Who is God?
Yes. Pharaoh asks almost mockingly, and what is the Lord of the worlds? That's verse 23. Moses responds by defining God through his absolute sovereignty over everything, heavens, earth, east, west, verses 24 and 28.
How does Pharaoh handle that?
He can't. It's too big. So he resorts to labeling Moses possessed, verse 27, and threatens prison, verse 29. Tyranny's classic response to what it can't control.
The conflict then escalates visually with the duel against the sorcerers, verses 32 to 51. Moses shows his signs, the staff becoming a serpent, the radiant hand.
And notice Pharaoh's advisor's reaction in verses 34-35. They immediately label Moses a knowing sorcerer, trying to expel them from their land. It's political spin.
So they gather their own sorcerers, verse 38, and the sorcerers themselves are motivated by earthly reward, asking Pharaoh if they'll be among those brought nigh if they win, verse 42.
But then Moses' sign overwhelms theirs. His staff swallows their illusions, verse 45, and the sorcerer's reaction is instantaneous.
They fall down prostrating, verses 46 to 48, declaring belief in the Lord of Moses and Aaron. Why is their immediate conversion so significant here?
It's a powerful testimony against Pharaoh and also relates to the chapter's theme about authentic inspiration versus falsehood, which we'll get to. These experts in deception immediately recognize something beyond human skill. Divine truth, when clearly shown, is self-evident.
Pharaoh's response is pure brutality. Threats of cutting off hands and feet on opposite sides. Crucifixion. Verse 49.
Terrible, yes. But the sorcerers, now believers, face it with resolve, hoping for God's forgiveness for their past errors. That's verses 50 and 51. Their transformation is complete.
The narrative then rushes towards the climax. The escape and deliverance, verses 52 to 68. God commands Moses to leave by night.
Pharaoh gathers his armies, described as a host at the ready in verse 56, intent on pursuit. Verses 57 and 58 even mention how Pharaoh's people were, in effect, expelled from their own wealth and gardens by their pursuit.
And then that moment of crisis at the edge of the sea, verse 61. Moses' companions cry out, "We are overtaken."
The ultimate test of faith. But Moses responds with certainty, "No, truly my Lord is with me. He will guide me." That's verse 62. And then the miracle unfolds.
He strikes the sea with his staff, verse 63, and it parts, each side like a great mountain.
An incredible image. Moses and the Israelites pass through safely, verse 65, but Pharaoh's pursuing army is engulfed and drowned, verse 66.
Right on cue.
The refrain returns, verses 67 and 68. Truly, and that is a sign. And truly thy Lord is the mighty, the merciful, the pattern holds.
So after that epic narrative of Moses, which is very much about physical deliverance and confronting political tyranny, we get the story of Abraham. Verses 69 to 104. The focus seems to shift here.
It does, yes. While Moses' story involved grand miracles and escape, Abraham's focuses more on intellectual confrontation and the purity of faith. Internal deliverance, you might say.
He starts by questioning his father and his people. Verse 70, what are you worshiping?
And their answer, in verse 74, is the classic justification for empty tradition. We found our fathers doing so, blind imitation or taqlid.
Abraham then delivers this powerful monologue, verses 75 through 82, basically dismantling that reliance on tradition by listing God's exclusive actions.
Exactly. Creation, guidance, food and drink, healing, life and death, things only the true Lord of the worlds can do. He contrasts the living God with lifeless idols.
This leads into his prayer, verses 83 to 89. It's quite comprehensive. He asks for wisdom, connection to the righteous,
and for faithful renown among later generations in verse 84. He's thinking about legacy. He also prays for his father's forgiveness, verse 86. Even though his father remained astray, it shows compassion.
And crucially, he prays not to be disgraced on the day of resurrection, verse 87. This sets up the final point about what truly matters on that day.
Yes, verses 88 and 89. Nothing will avail, not wealth, not children, except for one thing. Coming to God with a sound heart, a Qalb Saleem.
What exactly does Qalb Saleem mean in this context, according to commentators?
Generally, it's understood as a heart free from shirk, from associating partners with God, but also free from hypocrisy, doubt, malice, and excessive attachment to worldly things. It's about sincerity and wholeness and faith.
The narrative then concludes with scenes from the Day of Judgment itself, verses 90 to 102, paradise brought near, hellfire revealed.
And the inhabitants of hellfire are confronted. Verse 93 asks them and their idols, are they helping you now, or even helping themselves? Their powerlessness is exposed.
They confess their manifest error, verse 97, admitting they equated false gods with the Lord of the worlds, verse 98. It's a moment of profound regret.
And they lament having no intercessors, no loyal friend, verse 101. Having rejected God's guidance, they are utterly alone. They wish for just one more chance, verse 102, but it's too late.
And then the inevitable conclusion.
Verses 103 and 104, the refrain, the sign, the disbelief, the mighty, the merciful.
Okay, so after these two very detailed narratives, Moses and Abraham, the chapter shifts gears again. We get a sequence of 5 shorter stories, verses 105 to 191. Noah, Hud, Eliel, Loth, Shu'ayb. They feel very formulaic.
They are, and that's the point. The repetition and structure is highly significant. Each prophet introduces himself in almost identical terms. Truly, I am a trustworthy messenger unto you, so reverence God and obey me, and I ask not of you any reward for it. My reward is only upon the Lord of the worlds. You find this pattern in verses like 107, 109, 125, 127, and so on.
What's the rhetorical purpose of hammering this structure home 5 times in a row?
It reinforces the idea of monoprophetism. It shows that the core message and the nature of the prophet trustworthy, seeking no personal gain, calling to fear God and obey, is consistent across time and cultures. It implicitly validates Prophet Muhammad's own mission by showing he fits this timeless pattern.
So while the core message is the same, the specific sins or issues addressed by each prophet differ slightly, reflecting their community's particular problems.
Exactly. Let's quickly touch on those. With Noah, No verses 105 to 122, the issue highlighted is social arrogance. His people object because his followers are the lowliest, verse 111.
And Noah refuses to drive them away, verse 1 and 14. The conflict leads to the threat of stoning, verse 116, before God intervenes with the flood, saving Noah and the ark but drowning the rejectors. And the refrain, verses 121, 122.
Then Hud, sent to the people of Had, verses 123 to 140, he challenges their obsession with worldly status and permanence, building pointless monuments on every high place, verse 128, and constructing fortresses as if they'd live forever, verse 129.
Their defense, again, tradition. This is not but the ethos of those of old, verse 137. Denial, destruction, and the refrain, verses 139 to 140.
Next is Aliyah, sent to Thamud, verses 141 to 159. He questions their sense of security derived purely from material comfort gardens, springs, date palms, skillfully carving homes in mountains, verses 146 to 149. He warns them against following the prodigal, those who cause corruption, verses 151 to 152.
They demand a sign, verse 154, and receive the she-camel, the Naka. There are rules about her access to water, verse 155.
But they defy the sign and hamstring her, verse 157. Punishment follows swiftly, verse 158, and of course the refrain, verses 158 to 159.
Then Loth, or Lu, verses 160 to 175. His message confronts a specific transgression involving sexual conduct, asking in verse 165 why they approach males and leave the spouses God created for them.
The response is hostility and threats of expulsion, verse 167. Loth and his family are saved, except for his wife, described as an old woman among those who remain behind in verse 171. The others are destroyed by a rain of punishment, verse 173, followed by the refrain, verses 174 to 175.
And the last in the sequence is Shu'ayb, verses 176 to 191. He's sent to the inhabitants of the thicket, the Atabayeka. His focus is different again.
Yes, it's economic justice. Verses 181 to 183 are very direct. Give full measure, weigh with a just balance, don't cheat people out of their goods, don't spread corruption.
How do they react?
They accuse him of being bewitched, verse 185, and mockingly challenge him, verse 187. If you're truthful, make pieces of the sky fall on us.
A challenge that is tragically met. They're seized by the punishment of the day of glean, verse 189. And the final narrative refrain closes this section, verses 191 and 81.
So after establishing this consistent pattern of prophetic warning and consequence across 7 narratives, the chapter returns to its starting point.
Right, the closing discourse, verses 192 to 227, it circles back to the nature of the Quranic revelation itself.
It begins with a powerful affirmation, verse 192. This revelation is from the Lord of the worlds, verse 193. It was brought down by the trustworthy spirit, Al-Ruh al-Amin, usually understood as Gabriel.
And specifically, verse 194 says, upon thine heart, emphasizing internal reception. And verse 195 stresses its clarity in a clear Arabic tongue.
Clarity and trustworthiness. These are key themes. Verse 196 then makes a historical connection, stating that this message is also found in the scriptures of those of old,
linking it to previous revelations. And verse 197 adds that the learned among the children of Israel would recognize its truth. It's positioning the Quran not as something totally alien, but as the culmination of a known divine process.
Then, verses 198 and 199 make an interesting point. If this same Quran had been revealed to a non-Arab, someone speaking a foreign tongue, they still wouldn't have believed.
Meaning the rejection isn't about language barriers, but about a deeper resistance in the hearts of the guilty, as verse 200 puts it.
Exactly. It suggests they won't believe until the punishment comes suddenly, verses 201, 202. And then they'll wish for more time, verses 203, 207, but it will be too late. The text reaffirms God's justice. No town was destroyed without receiving warners first, verse 208.
Now, the focus sharpens. Verses 210 to 212 deliver a very strong denial.
A crucial point. The Satans did not descend with it. It explicitly refutes any claim that the Quran's origin is demonic or connected to lower forms of inspiration. It says Satans can't bring such a thing, it doesn't suit them, and they're prevented anyway.
This directly sets up the contrast with the poets, doesn't it?
Perfectly, because if Satans didn't bring the Quran, verses 221 and 223 ask, well, who do Satans descend upon?
The answer, upon every sinful liar, Verse 222, those who eavesdrop on heavenly discourse and are mostly liars. Verse 223. This leads directly into the verses that give the chapter its name.
Verses 224 to 226. And as for the poets, the errant follow them. Do you not see that they wander distractedly in every valley, and that they say what they do not do?
So this is the core critique. What exactly is being condemned here? Is it poetry itself?
Not poetry as an art form, no. Commentators generally see this as a critique of a specific type or function of poetry prevalent in pre-Islamic Arabia. Poetry driven by tribal boasting, vanity, insincerity, saying things for effect, perhaps inspired by unreliable sources, like the jinn, which was a common belief, not by truth.
Wandering in every valley, suggesting they lack a firm grounding or direction.
Yes, driven by whims, passions, or patronage. And saying what they do not do points to hypocrisy and a disconnect between words and actions, unlike the prophets whose lives embodied their message.
But then the chapter offers a crucial exception at the very last verse, 227.
This is key. It exempts poets who believe and perform righteous deeds and remember God much, and vindicate themselves after they have been wronged.
So it's not about the medium, but the message and the messenger's integrity.
Precisely. If poetry, or any form of speech, is rooted in faith, good deeds, remembrance of God, and used for justice, like defending oneself or the community when wronged, then it's not only acceptable but praiseworthy. It draws a sharp line between divinely inspired truth and unreliable, self-serving human rhetoric.
The chapter ends with a final warning to wrongdoers about the turnaround or homecoming that awaits them.
It brings the focus back to ultimate accountability.
So looking back at the whole chapter, Ash-Shu'ara, the poets, the title functions almost ironically. It uses the label poets to ultimately define the Quran against that kind of potentially corrupting human inspiration.
That's a great way to put it. The structure, the repeated refrain, the narratives, it all builds a case for the unique, trustworthy, divine origin of the Quranic message, contrasting it sharply with the potential falsehoods of purely human invention, especially when detached from faith and ethics.
The whole chapter is an argument for authenticity, using history and this powerful refrain as its evidence.
Absolutely. It forces you to consider the source and sincerity behind any powerful speech.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listeners. This chapter draws a stark contrast between language rooted in divine truth and sincerity, the prophet's call, the Qalb Saleem, and language that wanders in every valley, saying what it doesn't mean. So think about the words we use and consume every day. Are they closer to the clear, consistent message aimed at truth and justice, or do they echo the rhetoric of those condemned poets, driven by ego, error, or distraction? Where does our own language find its source?